place.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Real Life Talks. I'm your host, Yvonne Heath, author of the book, Love Your Life to Death, and founder of the I Just Showed Up movement. So I'm so excited to have my lovely friend, Sharon Sayler, with me today. Sharon, good morning. How are you? I say good morning because it is a very early morning for you. How are you doing at 6 a.m. Pacific time? You're such a trooper. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. Luckily, I work a lot with the East Coast, so I'm on East Coast time most of the time. Go to bed early, get up early.
Well, and it was like, well, I can't really complain about 9 a.m. if Sharon's willing to get on camera at 6 a.m. So I'm delighted that this worked out. And, you know, I'm so excited. We've had some wonderful conversations in the past. And as I was preparing for the show, I kind of peeked at your website, and, you know, no matter how long, I've been a healthcare professional for many years, and, you know, I've interviewed many people about grief and overcoming obstacles. And every now and again, I still say, wow, you know, this really hit home. And do you know what hit home for me? I'm going to put my glasses on and read.
No idea.
Well, I know, I'm going to share.
Should I fasten my seatbelt?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yes, always. So you talk about autoimmune disease and not letting your disease define you. And I actually wanted you to share what autoimmune disease actually is. But what you shared on your website is, did you know there are over 100 conditions, less known research treatments that people are suffering every day that compromise their immune systems? And you said, like, they're not the big ones like rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and those that have been well researched, right? And there's better and better treatments. And often when things are not defined, you hear the good old, oh, it's all in your head. You know, maybe it's just hormones or, you know, mental health. And you have to not only overcome your physical, the effects of this rare disease, but the mental, emotional, and the stress of maybe even not even being believed. And that hurts my heart.
Absolutely. It's all too common. And even putting it in a very current perspective, we're getting that a lot with what they're now calling long COVID. And a lot of those symptoms are very, very similar to a lot of autoimmune: fatigue, brain fog, joint pain. And that is the problem with autoimmune, is because it can pop up in many cases. Mine was a skin condition. Luckily, it is very rare, but I had people in my world who spotted it and knew what it was and was able to label it fairly quickly. But too often, the symptoms just bounce in this little area of fatigue and some brain fog and things like that. And nothing happens to put it outside so you can get a label on it. And it can even mimic things like menopause, where then all of a sudden people go, oh, it's just menopause, and brush you off, as if menopause was something to brush off too. It can be very disheartening.
Absolutely. And the thing with all of this is, when you think of brain fog and fatigue, that's something that can just be, oh yes, life is so busy, we're all fatigued, and it can be brushed off. And even by your own self, right? Geez, you know, why am I so foggy, and being hard on yourself? Why can't I get my act together? Why can't I think straight? And maybe you don't even share those symptoms.
Oftentimes you don't share the symptoms because you first start sharing them with your family members, and they're so used to you, they may not even notice. And I know when I was at the depths of my brain fog, the scary thing for me, Yvonne, was I thought I was okay.
Right.
Family members were saying, giving me little, like, you know, those little odd body language movements, like, what's going on?
Sure.
But never really said, I'm not so sure you're okay. And yet I can look back to the times of my diagnosis where actually I signed some legal papers and things. And I look now and I go, wow, I don't even recognize that signature. So it can be that sneaky. And you're not quite as well as you think you are. So I say, speak up to your doctor. If you've just got this opportunity, you're like, things just aren't quite right. And let's hope it's not an autoimmune condition.
Sure.
Let's hope it's just a nutritional deficiency, which it could be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's go back, Sharon. And so when we talk about autoimmune disease, of course, you've been speaking about it for many years, and I have as a nurse. So what is autoimmune disease?
Well, it's in a very layman's term, very quick and dirty type of description. It's where your own body, your own immune system starts attacking your body, whether that's at the joints or creating inflammation is the basis of autoimmune disease. It's runaway inflammation in the body. And a lot of people don't talk about inflammation. But for me, two key points in the changing of the diagnosis and being able to become what I call now is a thriver, regardless of the diagnosis. And that's my hope and aim for everybody, is to be able to say, okay, yes, there is that diagnosis, but it doesn't define me, as we talked about. But the idea of getting that inflammation under control is key. And then you can begin to attack the other symptoms. But it's at the heart of it, it's the body. And I'm not one to believe that the body, is like, some people get upset with themselves, like, oh, and blame the body for doing it. But it's doing its thing. Something is out of whack.
Right.
And it's doing what it's supposed to do.
And I love that you're a thriver and you focus on, now what, moving forward. But let's just go back for a minute and say, when were you diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and what was it? What was the name? What were your symptoms?
Well, the current diagnosis was 2014. And I woke up I had been on the road for a long time. I flew into Florida at midnight, threw myself into bed, going to get up, give a speech the next morning. And I woke up. Now, mentally, I was ready to hop out of bed, but I couldn't move my legs.
Wow.
And that was terrifying.
Oh.
You begin to wonder, and all sorts of things go through your head. Stroke, you're just thinking all these terrible things. I was finally able to coax my body to be able to stand up, but I knew something wasn't right. But Yvonne, the old trooper that we are, you're like, okay, steel myself up and go give that speech. But I knew something wasn't right. And within 24 hours, my body was covered pretty much. I've never understood this part. It was only covered down to my knees. It was like the lower legs never really were involved in any of this. They were involved in the weakness, but not the hives that happened within 24 hours.
So you had hives right down to your knees.
Right in my scalp. It was not fun. And when you're out of your home territory, it's very, very hard to find, like, okay, where do I even go?
Wow.
So I actually did go to an ER, an urgent care type of thing, who agreed that I wasn't contagious and told me to fly back home, which I did. And then a couple of days later, I was diagnosed with what's called dermatomyositis.
Dermatomyositis. Okay.
Yeah, which is a great big long. Dermato means skin involvement.
Yeah.
And myositis means muscle weakness.
Okay.
But the problem when you're diagnosed like that is, I heard those words and it meant absolutely nothing to me.
Yeah.
I could see what I was seeing to my body. At that time, I didn't have the major skin rashes that caused your skin to peel off. I just had hives. And it could have been supercalifragilistic. It meant nothing.
I wouldn't know either. I wouldn't know what to do with that.
And then the problem there was, I could tell from the doctor's body language, it wasn't good though, which was more terrifying than the word, because they are kind of looking away from me. They're not making the kind of eye contact they had been making when they walked into the room and said, hi, how are you doing? And then she said, she goes, I forgot something. I'll be right back. But, my other work is in body language and communication. So I knew right away.
Yeah. She's going, uh-oh. I don't know what to do.
So the old spidey sense is going, uh-oh, that's odd. Comes in with another doctor that I'd never met. He takes one look at my hands and I'm thinking, it's not my hands, it's my legs. It's the hives. What are you doing?
Right.
He nods and walks out of the room. And that was so impersonal. It was like, I don't know, it was like a mannequin or something. It was not seeing me. And
healthcare professionals, please never do that. Can I just like pause for a moment? Please never do that. Okay, carry on.
Even non-professionals, please make eye contact.
Don't do that.
Anyway, she walks back. She goes out. They go out, obviously, to have a discussion. She comes back, and her head's down, and she's afraid to make eye contact, and then proceeds to give me these terrible statistics about the condition. But there again, just from the body language, my ears went closed. I was so scared, just from the way that the situation was unfolding. You begin to go, oh, this isn't good news. And then, of course, your mind goes, oh, my goodness, how bad of not good news is this going to be? And you steady yourself, and you really don't hear like you need to hear. So anyway, that's the long story short of it. It was not fun to be diagnosed with it, but immediately went out of the room and tried to figure out how to spell it. Went up to the desk receptionist and asked her, how do you spell that word?
Yeah, I wouldn't even know.
And then dropped into Dr. Google, which I don't recommend.
Oh, no, gosh, no. That's a terrifying rabbit hole, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Sharon, there's so much to unpack in there. I mean, as a medical professional, I always think, I want medical professionals, anyone involved in that, to just allow their humanness, right? As opposed to, okay, this is awkward. This is uncomfortable. Yes, I know. And allow your humanness. What if they touched your hand and said, Sharon, I have news to share, and it's not great. And to be honest, I don't have all the answers. I don't, I'm going to do some research. I mean, just if only they could just allow their humanness and connect with you in that, it wouldn't be so isolating.
Absolutely. And the idea of, I didn't even know if it was contagious type of thing, because at the time, I could tell, like you said, it wasn't good news. All these questions go out of your head until you leave the room, until you separate yourself from that situation. Sure. Sort of like the minute you get on the elevator, you're like, oh, darn, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? And don't beat yourself up, guys. That's a natural response to a big shock.
Absolutely. And going back to the fact that I didn't even mention, hello, Miss Sharon here is an amazing international keynote speaker, author, and you are an expert in body language. And share a little bit more about what your passion was at that time.
Oh, my absolute passion is going around and teaching professionals to understand how to match the nonverbals to the verbals. So those types of situations don't happen. You don't have to be in the medical profession to have people give a misunderstanding from what you're saying. I work a lot with professionals who are going up the ladder, and then they get stuck at a certain point. And whether it's their management that sends them over, or they contact me professionally and just say, hey, look, I want to do a one-on-one with you. What's going on? And that's the key point, is understanding what part of me is not being connected at that humanness level. Oftentimes it's something really simple. One time I was chatting with a woman. She was awesome. And I was trying to figure out, what is the body language thing that she's doing that people are finding, and giving her some very critical reviews. And I always, we do our body language for a reason. We do it to protect ourselves, or something that we learned from childhood, some type of reason. And she seemed to be such a just amazing woman, except she had this habit of looking up and over you to talk. So imagine someone giving you news like this. Imagine a doctor who did this that wasn't making eye contact. Well,
it's like, hello, I'm right here. Hello.
What she was doing, what she was doing was not mean or evil, though. She sort of had her script up here.
Right, and she wasn't even aware, was she?
Not even aware of it, no. But once made aware of it, I said to her, well, let's make your script transparent so you can still see it, and bring it down right here to eye level. So we practiced that, and that, lo and behold, it was a quick fix. But that's usually the case. If the doctor, as you had said, had made some attempt to not be so afraid of the statistics, be afraid of what's going on, I wouldn't have been afraid. But fear transfers.
Yeah, and also to be okay with not having all the answers and saying, I'm not that familiar with this, and I'm going to get familiar. And, just thinking of that, when people hear a diagnosis, it literally like changes your, life is unpredictable, prepare for anything. Suddenly you're on this path. You don't want to be on this path. You did not choose this road. It chose you. And so here you had this wonderful career, and I mean, you still do, but you were, sharing and helping people with connecting their verbal and nonverbal. I mean, what an amazing passion. And suddenly you're going to do a keynote and your legs won't move. Yeah. There's tremendous grief in, okay, so now suddenly maybe that's going to change. Now you have a diagnosis, and suddenly, and also when it's also, you can't hide hives all over, even if they're not on your calves, right? So so there it is, you're exposed to the world. And of course, if you have hives all over, people aren't giving you big, warm hugs. They're going to be afraid to catch something. Like, there's just so many layers of grief in that. And as much as, I hope that you are just like, you are so incredible. And I love this. You became, your friends say that you have an irrational passion to encourage and inspire others to live well, whole, and complete. And I love that so much. And I also hope you allowed yourself those times to grieve. It's a lot.
I did, but interesting, the grief came later, right? At the beginning of the diagnosis. It's urgent. What do I have to do to get rid of this?
Sure.
And the thing about the way that I was told, it's you have dermatomyositis. And that's a label. All of a sudden you have this big red label across your forehead, blazing this thing. And it was all about ownership. And luckily with my training and being a bit of what I call a word nerd, and words have meanings, when it was said that way was with someone in a white coat. So gosh, I was from that era of white coat authority.
Oh, yes.
I had to be really careful. And I remember the conversation well. I was able to switch back into the old mode, out of the shock mode for the medical, when someone said, you have dermatomyositis. And I just said, thank you. And she looked at me, she says, well, no, you need to take this seriously.
Did you hear me?
Exactly. And I heard you, but I'm not taking ownership of it. And the key critical factor is, I used to talk a lot in Florida, pre-pandemic, shall I say, talk a lot in Florida. And one of the things I would always say, look, you can either take ownership of it, or you can acknowledge that you have it. So it's like, I always like to say, it's like cockroaches. Yes, I agree, they're in the house. Oh, yes, I guess technically we can say I have them, but I don't want it, and I'm going to get rid of it. And that's the key to looking at this. Are you making it your identity, your ownership, and you're going to hold it close to you? It's very hard to get rid of something that you identify with. Or if you can agree that, yes, this is here, but let's get rid of it.
Wow. I love that. And, you're so right, in words have power. And I think, people really need to pay attention with what they're telling themselves, and B, what others are telling them. They don't have to, like you say, I don't have to own that. I don't have to, it's interesting, because I even think of, as a nurse, I mean, back in the day when I started, now they have a lot of fancy lifts, and thank goodness we were the lifts. Like when I started nursing, and my back was destroyed. And I remember it's that sort of reframing, right? Because I have a bad back. I have back issues. And I carried that, right? It's like a title. And, I realized that I don't have to carry it. And so I say, sometimes, my back is weak, or can be. And so I'm strengthening it, or I choose to really strengthen it. And, just sort of that reframing is helpful for people. And I love that. And we have to talk about, like, I always say that if you've had pain, trauma, traumatic things in your life, whatever you've had, if you can turn that pain into purpose, then it isn't just a hard diagnosis, a hard thing that you went through. Yes, it is. And now you're not letting it define you and you're creating something good from it. So tell me about the autoimmune hour.
Thank you. In early 2015, January 2015, so it was about 6 months into my diagnosis. Things have settled down enough that it was still pretty bad. The skin was still peeling off. But
so your skin was actually peeling off at that time?
Imagine going to bed at night with a hive and waking up the next morning with it like skin peeling off like a 3rd-degree burn.
Oh,
it's extremely painful. You don't know what part is going to peel off when. And I can laugh about it now, but body's amazing. There was so much pain that I really wasn't in pain anymore. I know that sounds very strange, but it just becomes this part of, people would say, oh, Sharon, you're so brave. I didn't know I had a choice. It's a very interesting thing that people from the outside were saying things like that. And yet in my mind, I'm like, I'm not that brave. Number one, I'm scared. Number two, when is this going to stop? You know.
Well, but you chose to not let it define you. You believe me. I have met more people than I can count in my nursing career who, once they have that diagnosis, it's like they gave up on themselves. It became who they were. They stopped thriving. They were not thriving. They were barely surviving. So I am going to label you brave. You've made the choices. Like that is brave. I do think it's brave. But anyways, that's just me. So
I started the autoimmune hour because I wanted to know more. And it wasn't just about dermatomyositis. I realized, thinking in hindsight, that my body had been building up to that very tremendous display, shall we say. There were times where I thought that I had been diagnosed with fibromyalgia. They said, well, you know, it's sort of like this, but it's not. It's sort of like this, but it's not. And so in hindsight, I could see how we got there, which is helpful to understand that. And it's also a little disheartening that it takes so long to diagnose oftentimes. There's an average of about 10 doctors and 7 years before you're given a label. So you can really begin to think that blame your body for breaking down and things. But I wanted to learn more about it. And there's a lot of it now in these 7, 8, almost 8 years. Has changed radically. About the research has gotten more precise and deeper, and it is easier to get diagnosed with an autoimmune condition now. So it doesn't take as long as time to take care of yourself. But the key thing about the show is I started and I was only searching out research doctors and things like that to talk to. And as I began to get deeper into understanding autoimmune, I realized that at the root cause is a lot of things. It's not just one thing.
Right.
And understanding, calming your nervous system, calming the mental chatter, dealing with past traumas, nutrition. Oh my gosh, you know, Yvonne, I thought I was eating well because I grabbed a salad in an airport. It's a salad. But then I realized there's so many preservatives on that salad. You have to tackle a diagnosis, and it could be any kind of diagnosis. You have to tackle it from mental, emotional, spiritual, environmental, the whole thing.
Wholeness of wellness. And that's what I love about your show. And I've listened to it, and I've been a guest. And you bring wholeness of wellness to people and encourage. And it's not just a focus on disease; it's a focus on wellness and all the aspects of wellness. And it's extraordinary. And it's amazing to me. You started that 6 months after your diagnosis. So you didn't waste any time. You're just like, okay, they told me this. I've got this skin that's peeling off. I'm going to do something about it. I mean, that's extraordinary. I mean, that's just so encouraging. And, you know, I love, we met we're both a part of the Evolutionary Business Council, which is this wonderful gathering of visionaries and thought leaders. And I remember seeing you on stage and thinking, wow, that Sharon is so powerful and she has an amazing message and so dynamic. And then, as you were saying, you mentioned, it doesn't define you. You mentioned, the autoimmune. I'm like, oh, you don't carry that. You don't carry it with you everywhere you go. And I think that's extraordinary. So in the last few minutes, and I really want to encourage people to go to the Autoimmune Hour. In the last few minutes, Sharon, if someone has been newly diagnosed, that they're so tired of this, going through flare-ups and then remission and so on, and they're just tired of it. What are some things that you would want people to carry in their hearts as they move forward?
The first thing after the diagnosis is give yourself time and space and allow yourselves to grieve. And that's why I have Yvonne on the show so often, to help people understand the grieving process, because your life will change. But that doesn't mean it's a bad life. It's just taking a turn. And I think that's the critical thing. So allow yourself to breathe. Oftentimes, once you've got a diagnosis, check out the research. That's why I started the Autoimmune Hours. I was doing my own research and wanted to know more about it. And check out the research, but be careful where you get the research from. Make sure that it's really valid research, because there's a lot of things out there that aren't accurate. And so check that out and develop a team, find a team. It's not just one doctor when you've got a condition, because oftentimes it's, in my case, it was the muscles, the nerves, the skin. I mean, it was so inclusive that one doctor couldn't be able to help me as much as I wanted to be. And then I find, and maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but part of the grieving process for me is begin to make meaning of it. And that's what the Autoimmune Hour is for me. It's making meaning of it.
Absolutely. I love that so much, Sharon. And I think I would just add, love yourself through it. Love yourself through it, and connect with Sharon Sayler. Go visit the Autoimmune Hour. Stay connected. Sharon, with all my heart, I so appreciate you. I'm grateful for this time. Do you see how it flew by? Yeah. Thank you so much. And yes, please connect with Sharon. So thanks everyone for joining us on Real Life Talks. This is about a show. We have sometimes hard conversations, but always empowering, and knowing that we can live our best life. We can learn to just show up ourselves and each other. And so my call to action, as always, if you want to live your life to the fullest, plan your life, plan your death, and then just love your life to death. And always bring your own tambourine to the party. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.